wouldn't it? You know, to put a stop to him at some point in his lifetime of Hearthstone career. But yes, you are right. We are going to be moving on into Bozzzton versus Viper, and this is going to be an elimination match, which means that the loser is going to be out for the weekend, still banking a good amount of points with their top 8 automatic finish by simply being here, but they always want more. Very greedy, these Hearthstone players. But here's Bozzzton's lineup with their priest we discussed a little bit earlier. Kind of fell flat on its face in match number 1 for Bozzzton, but the Tempo Demon Hunter and the Galakrond Stealth Rogue.
Yep, the man with the greatest name in all of Hearthstone, Mr. Elias Sibelius over here, has a pretty strong-looking lineup. I get the idea behind the Galakrond Priest. I don't like it. Like, I don't see the power of this deck, but plenty of other people who I know are smart Hearthstone players have told me that it is a good deck. So I'm still waiting to see the lines and see the power level of this deck come into play, because I currently do not trust it. But otherwise, Galakrond Stealth Rogue, he has the list of that deck put together. Viper, same deck, but a little bit of a tech choice in there with the Togwaggle Scheme. And outside of that, he has that Control Warrior that we saw put to great use by Bunny Hopper yesterday.
Yeah, and again, we'll see, you know, a little bit more of this Control Warrior potentially anyway. So just to see, again, just really put it to the test for me, because I'm still not overly convinced. I get why it exists, and I get especially why it exists in a last hero standing format, but I think that might be its total career life for me, sort of based on what I've seen so far.
Yeah, I mean, we'll wait and see. There's certainly still scope to build a, you know, quote, Control Warrior deck that isn't as empty of win conditions as this one is. You know, you can still like play some late game potentially, but of course all that kind of stuff just very much gets in the way of all the fluid stuff that you're trying to do with this deck, with the risky skipper clears and the blade storms and all that kind of stuff. You don't really want big clunky minions getting drawn and just clogging up your hand. So I do agree that it looks like the most successful version of Control Warrior will be a Kill 'Em All variant, just an outright Fatigue Warrior. Whether or not this is within 3 or 4 cards of the final build or not, I don't know. Because there are some big question mark cards in, like Grand Lackey Urk, for example. I just don't see what it's there in the deck for, personally. Whether it's supposed to be a removal turn, a big burst of value in the late game, I have many, many questions about it. But luckily, we're going to get to see another very high-level control player piloting that deck, hopefully at some point in this series.
Yeah, and there might be a point, at least in this series, that Viper might be quite happy with playing Last Hero Standing, because I feel like the Rogue from Bozzzton and the Priest from Bozzzton would just destroy the Warrior, at least from what I've seen of how the decks work and interact. Obviously, there is the Demon Hunter that the Warrior can get a win with, but I think outside of that, this Warrior's just going to take a loss if it matches up against anything else. So I think even though this isn't the Highlander Stealth Rogue or the Highlander Rogue from Bozzzton, it still has Galakrond, Togwaggle, and some other stuff, right? So it can still generate an obscene amount of value, even if that's just purely off the back of the Draconic Lackeys.
Yeah, let me just check this rogue list real quick. Does it play Rogue Galakrond? Yes, it does. Okay, you can probably outvalue a Warrior with it then. Yep, that seems fine.
Oh, we are going to see the Rogue Mirror, though, by the looks of things. So this might be, buckle in. The last one we saw not too long ago went the distance with dragons all over the show. So we might see the same again. Because outside of Van Cleef, there isn't really any killer threats, right? There's no real way that in a Rogue Mirror either of them are really going to end the game quickly.
No, you wouldn't have thought so. I would say that Bozton's deck is a little bit more well equipped to try and do the early tempo thing, because of the Frozen Shadow Weavers are a much better tempo card than the equivalent cards that Viper is playing, which is a single copy of Togwaggle Scheme and a extra copy of Devoted Maniac. So if it's going to go tempo one way or the other, I would expect that to be Bozzzton. But yes, quite often it does resolve all the way back down to just sort of that late game battle that we saw in Viper's previous series.
Yep, and we'll have to look how that one plays out. Viper, no stranger to long drawn out value games. Can Bozzdton keep up? Well, he has brought his priest, which is again quite used to playing the long value games of generation of cards. So let's see how he fares now in this mirror. Game number 1 between Viper and Bozzdton. The loser is done for the weekend, and not in the good way, whereas the winner gets to continue and fight on and will face Hunter Ace in the next match.
Yeah, in our final match of the day, in fact. It does seem like that quick as you like 3-0 from Swids has seemingly sped up our day quite significantly, as our other series have been very much in the grindy mold that we saw from our battles yesterday.
Yep, thanks a lot, Swids, to keeping the pace. Again, I do not mind long grindy games. The only issue I have is there are only 24 hours in the day.
I know.
So that is my only problem with it, is that we can only fit in a certain amount of games, and I'd like to see them all. So let's see what happens. Spy Mistress down for Bozzdton early on, and this is just going to interest me now, is when the attack happens or when it doesn't. Because I just swing because I like doing damage to phase, and a lot of the time the only way, depending on when you get it down, if you on the play, then they only have dagger to really answer it, or a backstab. Obviously, with Bozzdton, if he swung in, he opened up a Seal Fate to be able to deal with it, which does make more sense on that specific turn.
Well, he also just has Greyheart Sage in his hand, so there's absolutely zero chance that this thing ever attacked. But I enjoyed all of the things that you said.
Do you see my mental capabilities of just ignoring the stealth package and saying, nah, he's probably playing secrets because he's a cool guy?
Yeah. Speaking of Spy Mistresses and stealth, though, that Spy Mistress off the top was an absolute godsend for Viper. His hand was doing absolutely nothing until that appeared, and then he was able to dump both of his Praise Galakrons onto it, which is a huge swing from what was essentially just going to be another pass.
Yeah, you definitely... Although I said that the matchup's likely to go long, you still don't want to just sit back, right, and watch your opponent play the game of Hearthstone while you have to just sit and pass every turn. So, yeah, something is definitely better than nothing here. The second Sage is active for Bozzdton, but he's holding a couple of cards, so he might not go for it right now.
Yeah, he has 9 currently, so if he played Greyheart, he would go down to 8 up to 10, so would then have to dump one more card, which he can do with the Spy Mistress. But it's a very low tempo play. I don't know whether he wants to address board with Seal of Fate or something like that instead.
Whilst Bozzdton is deciding, I have a question for you.
Go on.
Akama does not make this list. Have you tried it? What do you think? What are your thoughts?
I have, yeah. I actually told you this story earlier. I was playing Akama originally, and then I just cut it for another Spy Mistress because I was.
Oh, you're only playing one Spy Mistress, okay?
Yeah, I was having more success with Spy Mistress. The problem is, like, the actual prime reward from Akama just isn't super relevant because it's really slow, which is not like what Rogue really wants to be doing a lot of the time. So like the initial 3-4 stealth body is okay, like it's probably about a good enough card to get into the deck, but actually I think you dilute your draws with something you don't ever want to draw in most matchups by putting that prime into your deck, which is the problem with the card in my opinion.
Yeah, let's buff it and make it play when it's drawn. That would be sick, wouldn't it? Just chuck it onto the board.
Yeah, sure.
Make it like Wax Dread. Oh, only the once though. But yeah, in the meantime there, Bozzdton did make his choice, get a second Spy Mistress down, and not only have stealth activators for his second Greyheart Sage, but also just have a lot of damage. There are no Fan of Knives in Rogue at the moment, unless they're discovered. So these pretty much always hit for 3, right? Each, obviously. Does Viper start going down to Value Town right now, Sol, turn 5?
Oh my goodness, he actually took Brightwing. Okay.
Oh. 7 mana, 7/7.
Legendary minion evolve it to a 4-drop. Sure. I mean, I guess that's fair.
What's not fair is the one he got. Not really much better. Now, this is a matchup where we're going to see Boom Pistol get some action, I think, because there are a lot of battle cries in the Rogue deck, such as every lackey that is made.
And that card is kind of key to the tempo push. If this game is going to end with just a tempo push into lethal, Boom Pistol bully timing will probably be a huge part of that. just, you know, the key turn where you actually just get a big board, bam, drop Boom Pistol Bully, they can't answer it, you get to attack for like 15, 18, 20 the next turn, you know?
My question is, how often do you think it's Boom Pistol and then either on that turn or the following turn, if you deem Boom Pistol safe enough, to then Shadow Step? And again,
Extremely common.
Okay.
Extremely common.
I confess I've not played the 2 of or Rogue Mirrors with Boom Pistol enough to have really seen the outcomes that often. Like I said, only really picked up a ton of Rogue plays super recently. But yeah, I know you and Derek definitely play a lot more Rogue than I do.
Yeah, so usually, ideally, you want to be playing your Boom Pistol Bully in a place where you're like nicely ahead on board anyway. So if that's the case, you usually don't have to Shadow Step it immediately, because how do they deal with it? You know, like without, you know, big Battlecry minions, they have to like backstab Abyss something, or like Seal of Fate Abyss, or you know, something to combo an Abyss and then dagger it, which isn't always easy to do because they have to combo the Abyss while their whole hand costs like 10 mana. So in that case, you can then attack for 5 with the Boom Pistol Bully and then Shadow Step it back a lot of the time.
Okay. So pretty effective way to push, although Viper doing a decent job himself of cleaning this up, so maybe pushing Bozzzton back a little bit where he doesn't feel like he can quite do enough to become the aggressor. But that is a 0 mana Faceless Lackey and with a Togwaggle in hand, so even though the Togwaggle, a large part, if not most of the power of the card is of course in the Treasure Discover, the fact it's just a 5/5 he can play is not half bad.
Well, the 5/5 is really kind of garbage right now because there's just a freaking 5/1 stealth on the board.
But I mean, like, it makes it
annoying.
It makes him use it though, right? Because that's not going anywhere anyway.
Yeah.
Because outside of some very specific discovers, that guy's going to get a good trade this game. So why not just get it over and done with? And while you have a very wide board as well.
Viper's probably just going to say right back at you here.
Can you discover any bomb generation? Get that Blastmaster Boom active.
You'd have to, like, Witchy Lackey a minion into a Clockwork Goblin and then Shadow Step the Clockwork Goblin.
Or Hench Clan Thug?
No,
Right?
much easier. You get... Is Stolen Steel still in the game, or did it rotate? Because you can just get Wrench Caliber with that, right?
Isn't Stolen Steel one of the base rogue cards now, or is that an expansion card?
I have no idea.
I don't know. Whatever. We just don't know. Is the answer.
So many options.
Bozzzton gonna prioritize taking down the Togwaggle, not too much of a surprise. Double Praise Galacrond as well means he can create a 5/1 himself if he really wants to. Already the Draconic Lackey, the Praise Galacrons for more lackeys. You can see where this game is heading there. Pretty straightforward here.
Choose soon.
Ooh. Got a bit tight there at the end, Bozzzton.
Yeah, definitely a little bit dicey there. I'm not sure if the ending of that was exactly what he wanted, but he did fill the board. Although it's not the most damage in the world, it is damage that Viper does have to consider. And we can see Viper's hand really kind of sucks. This wand might have to be played here. Or do you think he goes for Kronks instead? Like Kronk's Taunt, maybe? Nope. Gonna pull the trigger on the wand.
Yeah, I don't really see the merit in the Kronks there. I think he just needs to go fishing for some stronger stuff to do. It's not great, is it?
Not the best. Not the best. Oh, okay. That's a pretty good card. But yeah, Viper, I feel like he's just getting the most meager outcomes of his discovers, his generations, and so on. First the Blastmaster Boom. What he's got in hand isn't mind-blowing. Now the wand into just a so-so, if not bad, actual wand. Restless Mummy does help though, and help a lot.
Yeah, I think he's actually still in a pretty reasonable spot. He's not super far behind. The Restless Mummy certainly contributed massively to that.
Mm-hmm. For me though, at this stage, I feel like Viper just... He can't have Bozzzton have a good turn. You know, actually play a couple of threats or one big threat or anything. I feel like he's holding on because Bozzzton's putting a lot of lackeys on the board, and that's kind of it. I would like to see the Shield of Galakrond or the Whelp get played here, something just a bit chunkier.
Shield of Galakrond would be his 4th invoke, so it might be merit to just getting that done.
I guess one thing Viper definitely has going for him is because he has Krunks, and we can see that Bozzzton does not all have Galakrond. It means that Viper can just get Galakrond quicker and maybe draw more 0 mana cards quicker and so on. And if you get to do that first, that might just be enough to propel him ahead in the game. Shield though activating the Galakrond to its maximum capabilities makes complete sense to me over the big ol' Whelp, of course. And what's Galakrond? What's Galakrond on for Viper?
3.
3. Oh, okay. Not quite there yet. But again, like what? My usual worry when the hand looks a little bit bad and you've got Krunks in it is you always have to look and say, 1, do I need Krunks for the post Galakrond? 2, what if I don't draw Galakrond quick enough? And 3, if I play Krunks, do I die or do I fall behind enough to be a problem? I think with the Titanic Lackey, he should be okay.
He's gonna scheme it, I think.
Okay,
yeah.
okay. 5? Oof, jeez. So my question with the scheme there on 5, is that ever going to be a backfire? Because, harping on about Krunks a bit, it is a 6 mana do a thing, and those things are very good, but it is a large portion of your mana every turn if you end up like drawing it back to back. So.
I mean, I think the devastations are just so powerful that if you play a Krunks every turn, you're going to be fine.
And I guess to be fair, with the Galakrond drawing, likely to draw Krunks, you're going to get 1 or 2 maybe for 0 anyway.
Yeah. The risk, obviously, you're running is just the flick from the opponent, which, fortunately, Bozzzton does not have currently. But it is just a good back-and-forth setup, right? You can use the Krunks to guarantee the Galakrond, and then you use the Galakrond to try and get as use out of as many Krunks as you possibly can before the flick can come into play.
It's definitely a cool way to use it, because I feel like a lot of people presume the scheme is just pure, well, let's go to fatigue and you know, like go crazy, whereas there are plays that can make it a little bit fancier. Boom Pistol Bully. It's going to be the time now for Bozzzton. He still has the Shadow Step, so he could do it, and it looks like he is. He wants to lock Viper out for a few turns, and it's going to work.
And this isn't the scenario I was talking about, right? Where ideally you're just comfortably ahead on board and then you use Boom Pistol to lock out. Like here, the board state's fairly even, so he just has to preemptively Shadow Step to protect it for next turn.
How do you like Greyheart Sage now, Sol? Slightly worse card.
That card is so good it would still be playable at 8.
Jeez. The good thing is, though, although you say that in a perfect world you want Boom Pistol to secure an already ahead board, Boom Pistol with Shadow Step surely means you end up ahead by the end of that second Boom Pistol, right? Because Rogue just cannot do enough or anything, really.
Yep.
So many options.
And with only 3 mana, he has Boom Pistol, Evolve, Lackey, Devoted Maniac, Greyheart Sage. Like, he can have a pretty solid turn, even though he has to play the Boom Pistol. Or, okay, he doesn't have to play the Boom Pistol, but I'm pretty sure he wants to lock out Galakrond for as long as possible.
Yes.
Ooh, Eviscerate can speed up this game a little bit as well. So the Tolve, we did not really touched on the Tolve, but it's a 2-6 in the way of these little minions from Viper, which means that he can't really deal with it in trade so well. He can next turn with Seal Fate Eviscerate, of course, but it really did put a speed bump in the way here, didn't it, for Viper to just clear off some of these pesky little minions.
Yeah, for sure. So he chose to go with Rush into Evolve instead of just playing Big Old Whelp. Which, you know, you spend 5 mana on both things and you get a similar sized minion both ways. One way you get to kill a 1/2, the other way you get to draw a card. Which is kind of debatable, I guess.
Yeah, yeah, I don't think it's too bad. The Boom Pistol Bully is coming down now, though. And he still has the room to play one of the lackeys. Draconic or Titanic. Probably just goes for the Titanic unless he wants to see if he can set up a big dragon for next turn, but I think I like the extra health, honestly. Just protecting or protecting everything through, not only now is he safe through Battlecry minions, he's getting safer through spells, which is the only thing that he can really think Viper can even do. So there's Seal Fate, and now there is enough mana for Eviscerate and Seal Fate number 2. But again, where does he go with them? Does he have to just hard trade here and hope for the best? And I guess just presume that the Galakron is going to get him there going forward next turn.
Yeah, I don't think Bozzzton is quite there just in terms of damage. So if at least one or more Kronks does appear off this Galakron, that is going to be able to get played very soon. Bozzzton might just get shut down here.
This is one of the weird questions, right? So we could see what Bozzzton wanted to do and has done with this Boom Pistol Bully, but the worry is if you commit to it and it fails, you lose versus... Basically, is it worth doing, and should you just play the long game from the beginning almost? Like, is the potential offensive using a Shadow Step, which is pretty insane, you know, in the Boom Pistol in that fashion, does that work enough times for you to try it? Because now I feel like, as you mentioned, if Bozzzton's offense is shut down, does he just lose because he's too far behind in terms of value?
Well, I think in the position he was in specifically, he kind of had to, right? Because Viper shuffled a bunch of Kronks in his deck and he was about to draw them with his Galakron. So he just had to Boom Pistol that turn to deny that from happening because he didn't have the answer.
Dark in the skies.
Yeah, so here's the Galakron anyway, and Bozzzton, as you can see, looked to the side. He knew it was coming and he's just got to hope that there's nothing too wild. But there's one. That Kronks is going to get a pretty good job done. But the Alexstrasza does still live.
Yeah.
You know, he can swing into it, of course, but it's still there.
It is. And now because there's only one being played for 0, so he can't use any of the others to get like 8/8 taunts or healing or anything like that. Now this flick does just take care of everything in terms of the problems for Bozzzton. Viper could Shadow Step it off the board, so it can't be flicked.
And then the question is it worth a Shadow Step? Maybe. I'm not saying it's not, but if he Shadow Steps it, then that's a Shadow Step used to something that's probably potentially only going to get flicked again the next turn. He also obviously gets one more usage of Kronks after that. But it's an interesting one, and that... wow. The kill on the Alex is a pretty big deal. I think Bozzzton had a ray of hope to a certain extent then. Just being able to remove the shield if we wanted to and push 8, but the kill on Alex is going to hurt Bozzzton quite a lot here. Also, Flick is still 6 mana. That is a lot of mana when you're only allowed 10 most of the time.
Yeah. I mean, it just has to be done though. Like it's essential.
Oh yeah, I
surely.
agree. I just mean it means the rest of Boston's turn is quite weak, and Viper, honestly, at that point, maybe could just play Boom and just drop a 7/7.
Just the absolute cataclysm that flick caused on the board.
Potentially plenty of value. Ooh. Pretty good one for Viper's position, honestly. It's unlikely it's going to be cleanly dealt with. If it gets to attack once, fantastic. If it probably gets to deal damage twice, which means that's a lot of healing going Viper's way. Oh, he's going to rush it even better.
Your presence offends me.
Double time and double pay.
I feel like you voice lined or voice acted this card, Sol.
Really? Wait, what? Why? Huh? I'm
It
confused.
says your presence offends me.
Oh yeah, the lifestyle guy. Yeah. That's my jam right there.
Now a bit of a look like a sigh of maybe frustration there for Bozzzton that now it's just slipping and slipping and slipping away. 7 cards in the deck. One of them is Krunks,
Nope.
and one of them is Galkrond.
Nope.
So
One of them is
Wait, oh
Gal-
no, Flick, sorry, Flick.
Yeah.
Yeah, Flick, apologies. Okay, there was about 10 cards left in deck when one of them was Krunks and one of them was Galakron.
Yeah.
But I guess, yeah, post-Flick, obviously that's not the case, but still the main part being Galakron is still not there, and he's got 5 cards left. He's going to fatigue himself to death if he plays Galakron soon.
choose soon.
Yeah, I'm not seeing it.
Your skin.
Not seeing a line that I'm happy with here for Bozzzton. It does really just feel like the aggressive push just hasn't got there.
No, and honestly, whenever you consider that just a 7-mana 7/7 is a pretty solid play to solidify the board, that's when you're in trouble, right? As Bozzzton, I believe, is just going to concede there. Seeing the board a bit too big and too hot to handle there. Viper got the job done with not only a well-timed Krunks, but some, I would say, level-headedness when it came to that, because he had to deal with double boom pistol bully that he knew was there. Bozzzton was going aggressive, and Viper took a bit of a rough opening hand and made it work, basically. So, you know, congratulations to him. That was I think a very well executed game from Viper and a good effort from Bozzzton.
Yep, not much to add from that. I think, you know, Bozzzton played it well. I think he had to block that Galakron on the turn he did, and if he was doing that, he kind of had to push all in with the boom pistol and shadow step, but it just didn't pay out in the end.
Yep, not too great there for Bozzzton as a start, but still plenty more games to go. Viper taking the lead with that rogue. He'll be on it once again after this break. We'll be right back with some more Hearthstone Grandmasters.
Half my money, all my hair.
Wow. I've never really thought about this.
Is this permanent hair loss? I would rather lose all of my hair than half of my money. Like, I don't have the most money in the world, but and I haven't done any research, but you can like buy new hair, right? And plus, I wouldn't mind being bald. It's not that terrible of a look, right?
I probably, if I lose all my hair, I'd probably spend half my money getting it back. So.
Half of my money.
Half of my money. Money comes and goes. Hair you can't get back.
Well, I am already losing a bit of my hair, so...
Can I buy hair? Like, I can buy things that regrow hair, right? So, imagine maybe that treatment's not that expensive. We can make it work out.
I would not be able to give a concise answer right now. I'd have to refer to Zalay and get back to you on that.
I'm about to lose all of my hair anyways. And like, honestly, you can get like hair transplants these days, I think, right? That's probably an option. I don't really care that much. God, why am I looking at Frodan? That's not good.
Oh god, I'd rather lose half of my money. I'm not even that rich. Yeah, you guys don't want to see me bald, trust me.
We are back and ready to carry on with our casting of Hearthstone for the day. Viper versus Bozzzton is going to continue. The loser is going to be done for the weekend. The winner will move on to another match, and our final match of the day, to see who makes it to tomorrow to join Swids. And I think it's good that Huntrace has some time to recover from what happened in the the previous match, as that must have been unfun to be on the other end of. But here we have Viper taking a win on in the Rogue mirror. Means he's going to be on Rogue once again, of course. This is the last hero standing if you are just tuning in, which means if you win with the deck, you get to keep it. If you lose with the deck, you lose that deck and you have to queue something else. So Bozzzton has a choice between Demon Hunter and Priest. I imagine we're going to see the Demon Hunter here, Sottle. Yes. Apparently. Chat, I would ask you to tell me if Sol's muted to you, but unfortunately, it's a delayed stream, so I can't. Anyway, keep talking, Sottle. I'll reiterate if I need to. Are you being trolled by the producer? I'll take it from here, Sottle. You go away. It's fine. So it sounds like they're potentially getting into a practice game anyway. Oh no, we are getting into the game. Okay, so it is going to be Bozzzton on the top. He is going to queue the Demon Hunter. So Sottle's long drawn out yes has been confirmed as a slightly questionable response. But Demon Hunter versus the Rogue that's kicking out now. Bozzzton doing fantastic with that opening hand. Double Battle Fiend and then a Sigil Runner that's going to be Outcast active to be able to draw him something a little bit later on. Viper, on the other hand, does have a backstab, does have a coin, does have a Van Cleef, and a Shadow Step. If only he had a Spy Mistress, this game could be over quicker than expected.
I wonder.
I think Viper working out what he wants to do here with the backstab onto whether he wants to just use the backstab on the Vile Fiend. But that just it so dramatically reduces the power of Van Cleef, and Demon Hunter does, especially early on, struggle to deal with high health. And if he can just take the damage now, which I do think he can get off a fairly sizable Van Cleef. But Viper gonna go for coin into Skyvatir? Is that? Oh, coin dagger. Okay. I hope Sottle's seen this, because when he's back, I need to talk to him about this one. Because I heard it all. So I thought he was gonna maybe coin Skyvatir to like poke it and then Shadow Step it next turn. But what do you make of this play? This is insane. Are you back now, Sol? Are you back with us?
I am back, yeah. Actually,
awesome.
I like this curve because it lets him deal with this minion just with the dagger swings, which I think you can afford to do now after the Battle Fiend nerf, which you couldn't really afford to do before. And then that allows him to play Backstab and Edwin Van Cleef in the same turn later on, which, you know, otherwise backstabbing the minion doesn't really achieve anything. You know, you don't get the big Edwin out of it. So I actually really like the way that Viper played this curve.
Okay, because there was also the other route of just taking the damage and then backstabbing it the turn after with coin, right, to make it 6/6, which he did not go for. That's all. Chaos Strike Means Bozzzton can push a ton of damage this turn off the back of that Crimson Sigil runner as well. And now, this is the only thing about the Van Cleef. I feel like the Van Cleef might just maybe not even see play soon. Unless he is just going to Shadow Step this Sky Vitir, because suddenly Backstab into Evil Miscreant looks really good as a setup next turn.
Nah, the Edwin is huge.
Okay.
Value
My point being
trade
that
the
if
Sky
he plays
Vitir,
a...
Backstab the 2/2, Shadow Step it, replay it, play the Edwin. It's massive. It's game over.
And I guess the Sky Vitir makes up for the complete emptiness that will be in his hand after that, right?
Yeah.
Because I guess that was my issue, is when you don't do when you do this play, which, you know, of course the Van Cleef is huge, you just haven't like Evil Miscreant and a Dream at that point, so it does mean you are very all in on the Van Cleef. But Bozzzton, we've all been there, friend, facing down a stupidly large Van Cleef and not much great answers to deal with it either. The Skull of Gul'dan means he has nothing to do for the interim.
And an absolute hard pass of a turn, yeah. If Bozzzton had actually found a play here, though, I would have, you know, maybe gone back to my banging the drum of why I feel like Frozen Shadow Weaver is so important, because you can see just the early damage plus just the damage from Warglaives and from Metamorphosis that Bozzzton has in hand. You can still sometimes race this good of a start from Rogue, whereas Frozen Shadow Weaver just completely shuts that down. But I think even then, with no play this turn from Bozzzton, I don't see it.
So, okay. Crazy suggestion from Raven Time. Because the only way I see he could ever win the game is just by going nuts and racing. Because there's still a lot of 8's worth of swings to kill Bozzzton from full health, right?
Yep.
Or 9's worth, right? Does he actually play Altruis like double Twin Strike? Weapon the turn after, Metamorphosis the turn after? Because Altruis has to be dealt with, right?
Yeah.
Like, Viper cannot leave it on the board, so that's a question.
Yeah,
Twin Strike pushes some damage. Viper's only on 19. I think this is what Bozzzton has to do. It hurts.
I think you definitely play the Altruis. I'm just not sure about the Twin Slices.
Okay.
Yeah, and Bozzzton forgoes the Twin Slice. Because they're only one of them is outcasted anyway, right? So it doesn't really have that big of an impact.
I was just wondering, I mean, I've not added everything up and all the permutations, but I wondered if you needed every single possible point of damage that could possibly exist.
Yeah.
So maybe the one extra damage from the Altruis makes a difference, but what does make a difference is a Kobold Lackey, and I'll be surprised if Bozzzton even has the mental capacity to stay in this game, because that hurts.
It does, yep. For sure these attacks go face. I mean, obviously the Edwin goes face, but the Stealth is also getting revealed and pushing face to activate the race. Viper chose to dagger there instead of developing the extra 3 damage, which makes sense because he has the Miscreant in his hand and he wants to combo it. If he can get a Titanic Lackey, for example, then that's probably just game over at that point. But I'm curious, he has 11 in play right now, 12 with the dagger. If he adds the extra Spy Mistress, he's pushing 15 instead. So yeah, it doesn't change his clock to play the 3-1, so doing it this way around does seem a little bit better. Maybe it changes his clock against I-Beam?
Oh, true. Yeah, you do have to consider that, right? Like, not only is it how much damage can my opponent do, or how much damage can I do, but can they heal? Can they taunt, for example? You know, all these things you do have to consider. But I do think Viper's in such a good spot. It's going to be a tough one for Bozzzton to do anything right now.
Time grows short.
It's just
He can't even get the skull active for, like, I don't know, a dream draw. I don't know what that dream draw would be, like double I-beam maybe. But you can't even do that, right? Like, there's just nothing.
Now I am complete.
There's a winning line from Bozzzton's side. I'm not seeing it.
Home in the shadows.
Titanic Lackey, go. Yeah, unlucky.
Well, and about that rush lackey just means he can just push more damage and race even harder.
Likely just Deadly Poison. Again, just making sure you have the race covered against
Why
I-Beam
not?
and whatever else might come down, yeah.
If there's time to play any other of those cards, then something's gone wrong in the game, and you probably don't need them anyway.
Agreed.
And that is just too much. Nothing, no I-beam, no nothing. Bozzzton's going to give himself a quick melon to the head. And that's just going to make Viper go 2-0 up. Very quick game, something we are not used to from Viper at least. But if you're ever going to Van Cleef a game, that's going to be one of them. And yeah, already taking a very strong lead. And now Bozzzton has the Priest versus the Mage. And again, there's a reason Bozzzton did not queue Priest into the Rogue. Sorry, I misspoke, not Mage, Rogue. And this is going to be a tough one because it's probably going to be a value matchup. Except I feel like Viper on Rogue can pressure more than Priest can. Priest is definitely going to be the defensive side.
Yeah.
And their only hard removal against, say, a Rogue board is going to be the Plague. I'll just double check Bozzzton's list before I misspeak about cards. But 2 Plague of Death, there's a Soul Mirror, but then it's 2 Time Rips for the spot removal for 5 mana. But yeah, I don't know. I'm just looking at the list and I don't see it stopping Rogue, especially when Viper's piloting it. Even if you want to go Uber late game, he has the capability to do that, right?
Yeah, it's my fear for Priest in the matchup. Like, if it gets to Galakron versus Galakron and everyone's at a stable health total, then, you know, call your winner, right? Like, it's just going to come down to a lot of generation and how the players navigate through those periods as best as possible. But my fear for the Priest is that there's just too much early tempo potential from the Rogue, as their mid game is stronger, their early game is stronger. Most of their minions are bigger than like Demon Hunter 3/2s and 4/2s and 2/2s, so they don't just blow up in the face of Holy Nova and Breath of the Infinite.
Thy blood be born again.
Instant Armet though, off the first invoke.
Not half bad. Really interesting sometimes because on one hand, the Amit, very good card, of course, especially with some of the smaller minions, but this deck plays a lot of big minions as well. So if you just play an Amit and it gets damaged and you can't really effectively heal it that much, it's a bit of a drawback. It's not like we're playing Combo Priest, right? Thought Steals can really open up the game though. As you can see, if you're going to struggle in a matchup as Priest, just play your opponent's deck against them and see if that's any better, right? It's often the case and the outcome of this deck.
Yeah. Invoke card and like insane removal tool? Yeah, sure. Seems like a pretty good Thought Steal.
For 2 mana.
Sign me up.
Yeah.
I see a dark future.
Very cool Amit actually there, because as we saw in previous matchups, the Spy Mistress often stays in the shadows for quite a while and stays stealthed. But here, one, the Amit will just farm it, no problem. But also, does Viper really want to leave a 7 health Amit just on board?
In the shadows.
No, he does not.
Yep. The respect is given. And although the deck, the Priest deck, does not really run any actual hard Resurrect cards, it runs a lot of Priest Discover and Creation cards, which means they can get them later on. So there is a chance that we see that Armor a little bit later, where he gets hold of a Psycho Pump or any of the spells that can do it. So the fact that that's just in the pool is something you always have to consider and keep in mind.
Right.
Nope. Saul's favorite interaction. Let's go. Or is Viper going to do the forbidden off-curve play? Although he can fill it out with the Lackey, I guess, just not all the time.
Yeah, I mean, it's quite the opposite, right? The guaranteed curve play is just to play Devoted Maniac and Lackey, but, you know, sometimes you just get a weak Lackey here and it doesn't really work.
Right.
Playing Greyheart Sage, there's no guarantee that you draw anything else to fill your mana. You have Shadow Step option to draw any more cards, but...
Choose soon.
It's very interesting watching Viper. Outside of the Edwin, styled turns or games, I always feel like no matter what turn of the game it is, Viper's like, is this going to be good for me on turn 50? You know what I mean? I feel like that's literally what he thinks about every single turn, even if it's just Do I dagger now? Do I play this now? Do I shadow step this? Like, is this going to be good for me like 10 turns down the line? It's just a very just interesting to watch because it's definitely the opposite of how I play. I'm like, is this turn good now? Okay, I'm playing it. Which is why I lose a lot more than Viper does.
Yeah, and speaking of 50 turns down the line, like that flick could end up being a much bigger problem than we even anticipated when we reacted. Like, oh great, he got the flick, that's a good card. Because remember, Viper is playing the Togwaggle Scheme version of Rogue, which he'll probably feel comfortable like drawing cards and going pretty deep into his deck because he knows that he can just Togwaggle Scheme, and that's not something that that Priest plays an answer to. But as you were saying, Priest does play an answer to it, and it's called Your Deck. Thank you very much.
Yeah. Often as well, in case you're not too familiar with Galakron Priest, most of the time you're really Galakroned into activate hero power and not necessarily trying to get the 4 invokes to kill a big board or anything like that. Your deck plays a good chunk of removal anyway. Sometimes it does come in clutch, especially at the kill 2 mark. I feel it's often quite good, but you don't consistently see a Priest Galakron for the 4 invokes.
Yeah, having said that, you might see it this game, if anything, just for the claw more than anything else, because he's already 3 out of 4, and he has the time rip in hand to finish it off. So
yeah, I do think obviously when you put against a Galakron deck and you end up pulling some of their invokes, you do it way more consistently, of course.
Yeah.
But yeah, in general, it's normally just there for the hero power. Very similar to the, not quite the same power level, but similar to the rogue aspect in some matchups where you really want the hero power more than the card draw.
I will act as your scale.
But this will test Viper. As a player who in the past has included cards that also mess with your hand and deck and generate a lot of random stuff, quite famously in fact, he will have to start really being on his toes because you find yourself in the late game against Priest and you can literally be playing against anything at that point. I mean, already, the board that's on there for Bozzzton is none of the cards he plays in his deck.
Right.
Time Rip is probably as good as it's going to get, right? It fits into the turn. It doesn't leave Bozzzton too much threat with just 3 power facing down on board. A little bit unfortunate you can't squeeze in the Vulpin there, but there we go. The Sethic Veil Weaver.
When your value begets more value.
Mainly just good to just have something to play and keep some hand space open.
Yeah, agreed. But now, yeah, he just does already have the fully on turn set going next turn. Definitely not the way this priest deck usually functions, but with a little bit of help from the stolen devoted maniac from Viper, got there.
I will act as your scale.
Yeah, and these types of hands / games are where you really find out if someone's a slow sort of control player or not, because it might sound simple, and we're going back to basics Hearthstone here, but if you have tons of cards, that's really good. It's like, right, as long as you can play them well. Because if you start just throwing away this and that and not getting good value from it, and you're playing a value game, you will lose against the person who does it even a fraction better than you a lot of the time. Viper, we know, is a very good sort of slow, long, meticulous game player, so he should be okay. But as you can see, this is going to be a very, high hand count for a lot of the game matchup.
Yep. Pretty easy Dragon Queen Alexstrasza there for Viper, even though he's a long way away from actually activating it. If you're ever playing a matchup that you think is going to go long, even if you are a 2-ops deck, that is pretty much almost always the pick in that scenario.
Yep, also this Colossus of the Moon, although a little bit clunky, again, slow matchup means it's more and more likely for you to be able to just play 10 mana on one card. It does get answered by Plague, but that's pretty much it, right? So it does mean it's actually just a really good floating turn, I would call it, where you don't really want to commit too much, you don't want to do too much. Okay, I'll just play Colossus of the Moon and see what he does,
Yep. Curious now as well from Bozzzton's side, now that he has got the Galakron fully invoked, which is not necessarily something you expect to do quite so quickly, is it then tempting to sort of greed it out for a bigger removal? or is it just far more important to start getting the value train running?
It's tough, right? Because you've got to ask yourself, is a removal that big ever going to come?
I think it certainly will with the amount of like massive stuff that's going to get generated this game. It's just like whether you can get ahead of that, I guess, by just jamming your Galakron first and starting to play big priest minions that generate.
Yeah, and also the fact he already has Krunks as well, so he could just cash in on the value of saying I have Galakron, then I have Krunks to like maybe make an 8/8, press more damage with the claw as well, with the 5 damage to face if he wants it, and so on. Also, funnily enough, we saw a Mass Resurrect get not taken and going for Shadow Madness instead. Very interesting, because Mass Resurrect, even though there's a lot of rubbish in the deck, it's still a 1-card summon 3 things.
Yeah.
Which is a highly valuable card, even in this form. But Shadow Madness instead. I wonder if that ever really gets more value, or maybe just because it's a card that's more playable, as opposed to a big chunky 9-mana card.
Yeah, I think when you get into matchups like this where hand size is going to be full on both sides a lot of the time, cheap, efficient cards are a premium a lot of the time. You'll just pick the cheap one quite a lot. You saw that in like Dr. Boom mirrors quite often, where it just like take a cheap option just so you had something to play and keep your hand size nice and low. So Shadow Madness over Mass Res probably makes sense to me.
Viper gonna go for Togwaggle, and it also means that he is not gonna commit that guy to this old scheme, but he doesn't really need to when you're playing such a slow matchup. Although Togwaggle, of old, was a high scheme target, now it's much more, well, I'm gonna be generating some big things, at least some big dragons anyway.
Yeah.
So it's a much more consistent plan to just aim it at the dragons.
Must consider.
This already now feels like this is one of those turns where Bozzzton's kind of running out of stuff to do with the priest deck. Just nothing super proactive to generate, so he just goes ahead and rips a Plague of Death instead.
Yeah, and here's the This is kind of what I was saying right earlier on. I'm just very interested to see how Bozzzton reacts to this, and now because of the plague usage, he can't react to it in the perfect way, can he? Apotheosis not only sounds like some kind of spell from a certain wizarding world, but it's also just a pretty solid spell when you're more under attack, right? You're on the receiving end for some aggression, and there is a 10/10 on stream, of course. So on the board, because I'm reading it at the same time, which is high aggression, but maybe that one's not going to get the job done. He did go for it though. Bit of an exhalation for Bozzzton there, as nothing really worked out the way he hoped. I did wonder whether he was going to actually just Galakron there and just at least deal with half of it and get the first bit done and then try and deal with the second half afterwards.
Right.
Oh, well, he could have actually fully cleared it with Galakron, right? Because he had the... Oh, wait, no, sorry. He didn't have a minion on board to trade. Apologies. I thought he had one minion on board. Never mind. Because then he could have propped the shield and swung in, even though he would have took a lot of damage.
Speaking of a lot of damage, if there's not an answer to this thing soon, it's going to end the game pretty rapidly.
I wonder.
Yeah, again, in these super slow matchups, like how insane is the card, right? There's just nothing that Bozzzton can really do about it. He might just have to do it the old-fashioned way. And now I really wonder if Viper's gonna take it to the extent where he now does everything to protect the Colossus of the Moon, because he knows just Galakron won't really do it. So maybe he clears all these minions off if he can, so they can't chip the shield off and try and ping it down that way.
Yeah, I think he would like to do that. It just doesn't look particularly realistic with the hand he has.
Yeah.
So I think this might be the turn where we say goodbye to Colossus of the Moon. Yikes.
Oh, Viper. Look, a large portion of me doesn't care if that was technically right. It was very wrong. Because that was 10 damage to a 2-4 and not to the opponent's face. Oh. Realistically speaking, the Moag doubles all that spell damage, so it opened up big AoE clears or higher damage outputs, big penances from Bozzzton anyway. So I don't really want to say the words "it makes sense," but it kind of does.
Yeah,
it just hurts me to watch. Yeah, it just hurts me to watch.
Because I think like Viper knows that his 10/10 is going to die this turn, so like a one-off hit of 10 damage just doesn't really achieve anything when the priest has a hero power, has renew, has all of these other things that they can use to bounce back up. So I think taking the trade just seems reasonable.
Quickly.
Oh. Okay. So, the value here is he gets to use the... You might think, why did he do that if Galakron kills 4 minions? It's so he can do this and use one of his opponent's minions to help kill the Colossus of the Moon and basically keep this Miscreant on board.
Yeah, the Shadow Madness
just looks a bit funny.
1/4. Yeah, it just retained him at 1/4 essentially.
Right, exactly. So now the big question for me is how Bozzzton actually chooses to go forward to win this game, because so far we've seen a lot of back and forward from the players in terms of just getting high threats on the board and some removal. Viper being down to 19 is not too much of an issue right now because Bozzzton doesn't have any threats, but as soon as Bozzzton can start pressing that hero power, which he hasn't really had the opportunity to do, he will be able to start just getting towards at least some half-decent priest minions, because there are some chunky guys on there, but that is also a big deal as well. The Wax Dread coming down means that now and again, and very soon, quite often, Viper is going to be able to just get hold of a free threat on board pretty much every turn once we get to that late game. He does still have that Togwaggle scheme, but there is still this flicking hand for Bozzzton, which means that he's just going to be an answer to any target he schemes unless Viper kills it off in the same turn he schemes it. But will Viper have the heads up to do that? I don't think so. I don't think it's fair to assume that anyway. Bozzzton does have to work out how he gets something to stick, though. He does have Amit once again and still has some lackeys, so it looks like we could be lining up some old, throwbacks to combo priest days, but maybe not quite this turn, as I do think he has to prioritize taking down this Wax Dread. Well, maybe he does just drop it, actually. The High Priest Amit, along with Kobold, could do. Maybe he's just hovering over that Krunks there to make an A8 dragon instead.
Time is running out.
Going to be important to know as well when Bozzzton's planning on swinging this weapon, whether he waits till almost the last minute or second or turn to be able to swing it and put some pressure on, or whether he catches it in now and it looks like he's going in now. Okay, Bozzzton is deciding that this game needs to end sooner rather than later. He has the board. There aren't too many answers in Viper's deck in general that can deal with 2 big minions without much of a board himself. And he has Apotheosis, he has Kobold Lackey for some damage, he has the Weapon Swing, the 2 big minions, he has Flick to get rid of anything that Viper may put in his way. So if he can taunt a big dragon, for example. Looks like he's going to go Shadow Step on the Kobold Lackey. Is he going to... Oh, I wonder whether he's going to scheme first for the lackeys and then try and draw some to help him deal with this board. But he's going to draw first. There's Flick. Going to come down for 0 mana. Pretty big deal. And the Edwin Van Cleef as well. Which means not only is he getting the 0 mana Flick from this Galakron, he can finish it off with a huge Van Cleef. 1 Plague has been played by Bozzzton. And the Galakron is gone. And he just saw a Shadow Word Death to take down the Wax Dread as well. So I don't see a great reason for Viper not to go for this Van Cleef. I feel like it's the card that's just been gifted to him to catch up. So I like it a lot.
Hey, I'm back.
Oh, hello. Welcome back, Soffle. As you may have noticed, viewers, I was kind of on my own for a little bit there, but it's fine. So I just had to sort a couple of things out.
Yeah, I mean, clearly I'm having some audio issues, as I'm assuming you can hear. I'm the only one in the world that can't hear it, which is incredibly frustrating. But yeah, I just did a full restart, so hopefully that fixes some stuff. That's a Shadow Word Death off the top.
He literally just played one.
I have missed a little bit of this game, but I've rejoined to a 14-14 and a Shadow Word desktop deck, so that seems good to me.
Yeah, to honestly give you the summary of what you missed, Bozzzton cleared a few minions off the board of Viper. He then went for the Kronks into the A8 Dragon and swung his weapon, which is why Viper's on 13. Okay. Viper managed to get rid of the mainstay of the threats, and he got the flick to kill the 8/8 and the Van Cleef off his Galakron. Without that, he was looking to be in some trouble, honestly. But Bozzzton with the Shadow Word Death at least has an answer to this Van Cleef, which is priority number 1 right now.
Time is running out.
So Bozzzton is running short on the specific single target removal now. That's double Shadow Word Death. The Galakron obviously been used up because it's live, and 1 Plague already gone. Is he really just going to try and beat him up with like 1/7? That'd be quite funny.
Has now at least got this Dragon Queen Alexstrasza that he picked many turns ago active.
Double Nozdormu combo. We've seen double Deathwing yesterday, Saul. Now we see double Nozdormu.
Yeah, it doesn't seem likely that this Nozdormu is going to have quite the impact that we saw from Gallon in the Americas broadcast. But...
Yep.
Time is running out.
So there is what, apotheosis. There's Morag Artificer, Penance. There's 6, so he can get there.
He can at least take care of the Nozdormu nice and easily, and then stop and actually have a think about his turn, which is quite often step number 1 of dealing with Nozdormu.
I think I would have snapped Apotheosis on the Amit first. It's easy for me to say because I'm not sat making the turn, but I think that was a very likely thing to happen because it's just always it's never bad, right? Because you know the minions you play get more health. Amit is a bigger boy, so it's never bad. I'm not saying it's always the right play because Lightning Breath could come into play here instead, but I feel like for a snap decision it would have paid off a little bit more consistently.
Scarlet Subjugator into the hand.
-2 attack for a turn. Very similar to was it Shrinkmeister of old? Oh, fresh Amit. Oh, there's the Waxdread
candle.
I
missed this. There's a Waxdread? When did this happen? That's kind of a big deal.
Pretty much the second you left Sol.
Okay.
Clearly Waxdread not best mates with Sol. He walks in and Sol walks out.
Yeah. That's kind of a big deal.
I did go over the impact of Waxdread in a slow control matchup. And that's what Bozzzton Shadow Word Death right before Viper made and drew the big Van Cleef.
Gotcha.
It's not lethal, is it? You've always got to ask that question when you see a Kronks just snap players. No, okay.
27.
There's
Wondrous
Kobold,
1 for 0. Oh my god, yeah. Wondrous 1 for 0 mana Kronkses. If he draws multiple 0 mana Kronkses, then it's lethal.
Oh,
yeah.
There's 1. There's 2. There's 3.
Oh my
Wow. What a game of Hearthstone. You came back just in time, Sol, because that was a spicy finish.
That's insane. Bozzzton just has the flick in hand to deal with all of this, and Viper just does it all as an OTK? That's absurd.
Honestly, it's not Bozzzton's day, is it? And I'm genuinely, I'm not taking anything away from Viper. I think Viper played very well, and I would be terrified to go against Viper in some slow matchups, honestly. But wow, Bozzdton has lost some games of Hearthstone today in some extraordinary fashions. I am sorry, Bozzdton.
Did he know? Like, I want to talk to message Viper after this, because like, did he get some kind of hand read that there was a flick going on? Because not necessarily, right? Because that was the play. You just went.
I think that
for
was just
lethal.
a good turn. Yeah,
exactly. He just went for lethal there, which is obviously like the line. But the fact that it's so beautifully shut down, like the one ultimate problem that Viper seemed to have there, which was the flick in hand was going to ruin his entire late game plan. That was really, really sick. I enjoyed that.
It was crazy. I've never seen it happen. I've never even seen people attempt that. But this is the difference. Viper, we mentioned at the start of the day, as he is going to be facing Huntrace soon in the last match of the day, we mentioned Viper does his own thing. How many rogues are running Scheme right now? None, other than just Viper? I've not even seen a list that's like that, right? Recently, at least. So Viper likes to do his own thing, and not only does he like to sprinkle a bit of spice on his deck lists, he knows why, right? He's not just going, oh, this'll be funny, or this'll make me stand out. You know, like, he clearly has a plan and knows how to utilize some of the more, I won't necessarily call them tech cards, but style cards for Viper. He knows how to use them because he has used those schemes, or not used those schemes in certain situations, the correct way every single game we've seen him play this rogue. I'm very impressed.
And now that I like think about it more, maybe that is just the core plan of that tech in the deck, that is just kind of his ultimate win condition in those matchups. He kind of cuts out all of the nonsense with like who's generating draconic lackeys or whatever else. Because actually when you break it down, that's very similar to like the dumb meme finish you could do against like control warriors or whatever, where you would shuffle like 10 Leroys into your deck with Togwag or Scheme and then rip them all out, which was like genuinely a thing that you could do to win that matchup, even though there were slightly more efficient ways. But when you're doing it with Kronks, like, that's even more real than it is with Leroy, because Kronks are so flexible. So if you can get that OTK turn, you can get that OTK turn. And also, like, sorry, I'm like reconciling all of this because I didn't watch half of the game, but that Wondrous one that he had in hand, he'd held for a lot of turns while I was gone, right? I
was just going to say he had it for a significant amount of turns, and there were turns, if you value Wand as a card, as in it's a good card at what it does, I think you would have just played it, honestly, a lot of the time, because he had the time, he had the hand space, he could have played it for just the basic, Wand gives me 0 mana cards. That is sweet. You know, but instead he held it for a very, very reasonable chunk of time there, and then just insta-ripped it for the Galakron. Very impressive overall. I'm excited.
Yeah. So I'm pretty sure like all of those things factored in, that is just the plan for that type of matchup, just to do exactly that kind of thing, which is really sweet, actually. I'm like a big fan of that innovation. That's really cool.
Yeah, and funny enough, Kronks and Galakron and Scheme has been around for a while, and no one's really made the connection yet for Viper. So really impressive stuff overall. Viper taking the win, and we're going to go to a short break while Viper just has his own break while we get ready for Huntrace versus Viper, the last match for the European region today. So make sure you stay tuned and check it out. It's going to decide who we are going to see tomorrow. So we'll be back shortly.